The first sign of trouble wasn't the barking, it was the silence. In the late afternoon, the savannah is usually loud in small ways. Doves calling from the thorn trees, insects buzzing in the dry grass, impalas snorting when they catch a strange scent. Even the wind makes noise when it slides through dead leaves. But that day, near a narrow streambed that still held a few muddy pools, the bush went quiet like it was holding its breath, and a father lion felt it before he saw anything. His name was Kito. The rangers didn't name him because he was famous. They named him because they had to. He kept showing up in the same stretch of land, always alone, always moving with purpose, always with two cubs trailing behind him like tiny shadows. Kito was not the biggest male in that region. He wasn't one of those perfect postcard lions with a full mane and clean face. Kito looked like life had grabbed him and never stopped squeezing. His mane was thick on one side and thin on the other, like it had been torn out by teeth years ago. His nose had a pale scar line straight down the middle. His right ear had a chunk missing, and when he walked, you could see he carried old pain in his shoulders. The kind you get from fighting other lions, not from hunting. But he was still strong, and more important, he was still there. The two cubs behind him were just past the age where the world stops feeling safe. Their legs were longer now, but still clumsy. Their ears were too big for their heads. Their eyes were bright with curiosity, but they stayed close to Kito's back legs the way cubs do when they don't fully trust the sky. They were his whole reason for being in that place. There used to be a pride here, a small one, a few lionesses, a few young, and 2 adult males. Then one season got hard. Then a rival coalition moved in. Then things turned violent. Kito survived. Most didn't. Now he lived like a ghost king. No throne, no pride songs at night. No group hunts. Just him, the cubs, and a shrinking piece of land that still had water sometimes. That afternoon, Kito had brought the cubs down to the streambed because the heat was making everything desperate. The little pools were ugly and brown, but they were water. In dry season, water doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to exist. Kito stepped first, scanning left and right. The cubs waited behind him, watching his body language like it was a language they were learning. Kito lowered his head and drank. For 10 seconds, it looked peaceful. Then Kito froze. His tongue stopped moving. His head stayed low, but his eyes shifted. The cubs felt it and went still too. Somewhere ahead, in the grass beyond the streambed, there was movement that didn't match the wind. Then the sound came, a short, sharp huff like air being punched out. Then another, then the first bark. Not a baboon bark, not a hyena laugh, a wild dog bark. High, fast, confident. The cubs had never seen wild dogs up close. They had smelled them sometimes, faint on the breeze, but smell is easy to ignore. Sound is not. Kito lifted his head slowly, and then they appeared. At first it looked like the grass was breaking into pieces, small shapes sliding through it, black, tan and white flashes, ears standing up like arrows. African wild dogs, 20 of them, not 5, not 8, not a scattered group passing through. 20, moving like they had practiced this. They came from both sides, half on the left, half on the right, spreading wide so Kito couldn't rush one side without the other side hitting his back. And when they reached the edge of the open streambed, they didn't charge right away. They stopped, they watched, their heads tilted, their noses twitched, their tails held high, wagging fast, not like happy pets, but like nervous engines running hot. Wild dogs don't look scary the way lions do. They don't have a mane. They aren't huge. They don't roar, but they are built for one thing lions hate: relentless pressure. They don't fight to win in one moment. They fight to win in many small moments, stacked on top of each other, until the bigger animal breaks. Kito stared at them and did not move. His body was between the dogs and the cubs. That part was not a thought, it was instinct. The cubs stepped back, bumping into each other, eyes locked on the moving ears and flashing teeth. One cub let out a tiny sound, half growl, half cry. Kito's tail flicked once, a warning without words. Stay behind me. The wild dogs began their first test. 2 of them trotted forward, light-footed, brave. They didn't run straight at Kito's face. They curved, trying to make him turn, trying to make him show a side. Kito turned his head but not his whole body. He was saving energy. The dogs stopped just outside his strike range and barked in his face like they were daring him. Kito didn't roar. He didn't charge. He just stared. That stare can stop a lot of animals. But wild dogs aren't built to stop. They're built to decide, fast, who is weak and who is not. And then the pack leader stepped forward. You could tell it was the leader because the others made space without even thinking. Not out of fear, but out of order. The leader was a female with a torn lip and a dark patch around one eye that made her look like she was always angry. Her body was lean, ribs faintly visible, not starving but hungry enough to take risks. She barked twice, and the pack shifted. The wide half-circle tightened into something sharper. A trap. Kito finally moved. He stepped forward, slow and heavy, as if he was claiming the ground. He placed one paw in the dust and scraped it back, leaving a mark, a warning. This is mine. The wild dogs answered with a sudden rush, 5 of them sprinting in, low and fast, aiming for his back legs. Kito spun, not fast enough to catch them, but fast enough to make them jump away. Their teeth snapped at air. Dust lifted, and the cubs watched their father move for the first time like a weapon. Kito lunged once, short and violent, toward the closest dog. The dog dodged back, barely, but the wind of Kito's paw swipe was enough to tell the whole pack the truth. One mistake and you die. So the pack did what smart predators do when something can kill them in one hit. They stopped trying to get hit. They started trying to make him miss. They rushed in again, this time from both sides. Kito turned one way, then the other. The dogs barked non-stop, a flood of sound meant to scramble his mind. Behind Kito, the cubs pressed into the tall grass, too scared to run, too scared to stay. Their eyes were huge. And then one dog slipped past Kito's turn, just barely, cutting behind him like a knife. That dog didn't go for Kito. It went for the cubs. That was the moment the savannah changed. Kito didn't think. He exploded. His roar ripped out of him like it had been hiding all day, and it was so loud the dogs nearest him flinched for half a beat. Kito launched toward the dog that was heading for his cubs. The dog tried to turn away. Too late. Kito's jaws clamped down on the dog's back. There was a sharp crack sound. The dog screamed once. Then nothing. Kito dropped the body and stood over it like a warning sign. The pack froze for a single second. Wild dogs are brave, but they are not careless. They know what a lion can do. But the pack wasn't here for one quick kill. They were here because they believed they had numbers, because they believed Kito was alone, because they believed they could wear him down. And once the pack saw Kito commit to protecting the cubs, they learned something valuable. They learned exactly what he cared about most. And predators love targets that force you to choose. The leader female barked again, and suddenly the pack split into 2 missions. 10 dogs stayed in front of Kito, rushing and retreating to keep his eyes busy. The other 9 spread wide and began circling, trying to find another angle to the cubs. Kito's head moved like a radar. His body stayed planted. He couldn't chase the circling group without giving the front group his back. And if wild dogs get your back legs, the story ends ugly. Kito took a step backward, pushing closer to the grass where the cubs were hiding. He was shrinking the space. He was trying to keep the cubs behind him no matter what. But the grass was thin in this area. The stream bed was open. There wasn't a big rock, no fallen tree, no wall, just flat ground and too many teeth. One cub tried to bolt. Kito snapped his head and growled low. The cub stopped. It understood. If you run, they chase you. If you chase you, they catch you. So the cub stayed, trembling. Now the dogs began the real attack. Not the testing rushes, the real rush. 7 dogs charged together at Kito's hind legs. At the same time, 3 hit from the side, trying to draw his head away. Kito spun hard and struck. His paw connected with one dog's shoulder and sent it tumbling. But 2 others slipped closer, teeth snapping at his ankles. Kito kicked out. One dog yelped and fell back. But the pack didn't stop. They came again, and again, and again. Kito's breathing got louder. His body was still powerful, but even power has a limit. And wild dogs live for that moment when the big animal starts breathing like it's running out of time. The cubs watched every second. They didn't hide their fear. They couldn't. They watched their father become a wall. Watched him take bites and keep turning. Watched dust stick to blood on his legs. And here's the thing about wild dogs that makes this so terrifying. They don't need to kill you fast. They just need to start eating you while you are still alive. That's how they do it to antelope. That's how they do it to buffalo calves. They bite and tear and keep moving. because stopping gets you killed. Kito knew that too, and that is why he did something that shocked even the wild dogs. He left the cubs for 2 seconds. He stepped forward, away from the cubs, toward the pack leader. It looked like a mistake. The circling dogs saw the gap and darted toward the cubs. The cubs cried out. The leader female lifted her head, surprised, but she didn't back away. She barked again, almost excited. Come closer, lion. Commit. Kito kept walking, slow, heavy, eyes locked on the leader. The leader female held her ground, and then Kito surged. A full charge, not a warning lunge, a real attempt to kill. The leader female tried to dodge. Kito's paw clipped her side and she stumbled. Kito's jaws snapped toward her neck, but the pack slammed into Kito from behind like a wave. Teeth hit his hindquarters. One dog grabbed skin near his tail, another bit into his back leg. Kito roared in pain and turned, but the pack had done it. They had stopped his kill attempt. They had saved their leader. And now Kito was in the worst position a lion can be in with wild dogs. Surrounded, not by fear, by purpose. The cubs screamed from behind. One of the circling dogs reached them. A tan-faced dog with a white chest lunged at the nearest cub. The cub tried to swat with a tiny paw. It was nothing. The dog snapped at the cub's shoulder. The cub yelped, and Kito heard it. That sound hit him like a spear. He did not turn slowly. He whipped around and charged back toward the cubs, dragging dogs off his legs with raw force. One dog held on and got thrown. Another let go and barked, backing up. Kito made it back to the cubs and planted himself again, roaring with a rage that made the air feel thick. The dogs backed off just a step, not because they were afraid, because the lion's rage was hot enough to get them killed if they rushed wrong. And then another twist, the sound of hyenas, distant at first, then closer. That ugly laughter that always shows up when blood is in the air. The wild dogs heard it too. They paused, ears turning. Because wild dogs hate hyenas. Hyenas steal kills. Hyenas gang up. Hyenas kill pups. Hyenas are trouble, and trouble means time. The hyenas were coming because the fight was loud and messy. The savannah always sends scavengers when it smells weakness. A few dogs glanced toward the tree line. The leader female barked again. Sharper now. Finish it. Fast. The pack rushed as one. This was it. This was the end game. They didn't split. They didn't circle. They came straight in. A full storm of teeth. Kito braced and fought like a father who understood there was no help coming. His paw struck one dog's head and the dog dropped. Kito bit another dog's shoulder and flung it. But a third dog got a bite on his hind leg and held. A fourth dog bit his other leg. Now Kito's back legs were anchored. His balance shifted. His body dipped for the first time. The pack surged harder. And when a lion starts to dip, wild dogs smell victory. The cubs watched their father's legs shake. They watched dust rise around him. They watched his roar turn rough. And then Kito did the one thing no one expected from a battered lion. He didn't retreat. He didn't collapse where the cubs were. He turned and ran straight away from them. Not a full sprint. A limping, dragging run, but a run with purpose. He ran toward the streambed edge, where the ground dropped into thick reeds and mud. The pack followed immediately. Of course they did, because that's what they wanted. They wanted him away from the cubs. They wanted the easier kill, and Kito gave it to them, on purpose. The cubs stood frozen, watching their father pull the entire pack away like he was dragging a fire away from a house. One cub tried to follow. The other bumped it and stopped it, as if even the cub understood the danger of moving. Kito reached the reed line and turned. The reeds were tall here, sharp and dense. Mud sucked at feet. The streambed narrowed, and suddenly the wild dogs' numbers meant less. They couldn't spread wide. They couldn't circle cleanly. They had to come through the narrow space, through the choke point. Kito had turned open ground into a funnel, and lions are built for funnels. The first dog rushed in too close. Kito's paw came down and pinned it. His jaws snapped. One bite, done. The next two dogs hesitated, just a fraction. Kito roared again, and the sound echoed off the reed walls, making him feel bigger than he was. The pack leader barked, pushing the pack forward. But now every dog had to think. Because in a funnel, the lion doesn't have to spin. He only has to strike forward. The dogs tried anyway. They rushed in waves of 3, trying to confuse him. Kito kept striking. One dog fell with a broken shoulder. Another dog ran back yelping. The leader female got close enough to snap at Kito's face. Kito swung and missed, and that miss was the opening. Two dogs hit his hind legs again. Kito's body lurched. He stumbled into the mud. His chest sank, and for a second it looked like the end had finally arrived. The wild dogs surged, and then the hyenas arrived. Not in the reeds. On the open bank behind the cubs. 6 of them at first, then more shadows behind them. They had come for the noise, and they found something better. 2 lion cubs, alone. The cubs saw the hyenas and screamed, a scream that carried across the streambed like a siren. Kito heard it, even in the mud, even with dogs on his legs. Kito heard his cubs, and something changed inside him. Not strength, not muscle, something colder, something final. He erupted out of the mud like a man rising from his grave. He twisted, tore one dog off his leg with his jaws, flung it aside, then charged back out of the reeds. The wild dogs jumped away, surprised by the sudden burst. They followed, but slower now, because the fight was costing them bodies. Kito limped hard toward the cubs. The hyenas saw him coming and hesitated. Hyenas are bold, but they are not stupid. A male lion, even injured, can crush a hyena's skull. The cubs ran toward Kito. Kito placed himself between them and the hyenas and roared. The hyenas backed up, laughing but retreating, because they didn't want that fight. Now the wild dogs reached the open bank again, and for the first time they saw the hyenas, and the hyenas saw the wild dogs. And in that moment, the savannah did what it always does. It turned one fight into 3. The hyenas surged toward the wild dogs, not to help the lion, but to steal the situation. Hyenas hate wild dogs too, and they saw weakness. The wild dogs snapped back, barking and biting, trying to keep their pack together. Kito didn't join the dog-hyena clash. He didn't waste energy on enemies fighting each other. He used the only opening he was ever going to get. He nudged the cubs into the grass behind him and began to move. Slow, limping, bleeding, but moving. The cubs followed, glancing back again and again, still watching their father fight, even while he walked away. Behind them, wild dogs and hyenas clashed in a loud, messy knot of teeth and dust. The wild dogs didn't want to lose their chance at the lion. The hyenas didn't want to lose the chance at easy meat. And Kito, the battered father, used their greed like a door. He slipped through it. He led his cubs away into the tall grass where the shadows started to stretch long. The fighting behind them faded slowly. Barks became distant. Laughs became faint. The wind returned. The insects started buzzing again. The savannah began breathing like normal, but Kito's body was not normal anymore. When he finally stopped, it was under a thorn tree with branches low enough to hide the cubs. He collapsed on his side, chest rising and falling hard. The cubs pressed into him, trying to lick his face the way cubs do when they don't know what else to do. Kito's eyes stayed open. He looked past them into the darkening grass. He knew the truth. He had survived the pack, but the pack had marked him. They had learned his limp, his breathing, his weakness. They would remember, and wild dogs don't forget easy targets. One cub curled into Kito's mane and fell asleep from exhaustion, still shaking in little twitches like its body was replaying the fight. The other cub stayed awake longer, staring into the grass, listening. Kito's breathing slowed a little. His eyes blinked once, then twice, and then, just when it felt like the story might end quietly, Kito lifted his head and let out a low, deep call. Not a roar, a call. The kind of sound lions use when they are trying to reach someone far away. A sound that says, "I'm here, I'm alive, come." For a long time, nothing answered. The cubs pressed closer. Kito's head drooped, and then from far off in the dusk, another sound came back. A lioness call. Then another. 2 lionesses, somewhere out in the grass, responding. They were alive. They were close enough to hear him. And that was the final twist. Kito hadn't been completely alone. Not truly. He had been separated, scattered by hard days, but not abandoned. The lionesses would reach him later that night. They would bring the cubs closer to safer cover. They would lick Kito's wounds, stand guard while he slept, and help him hunt again if he could still hunt. Kito didn't know any of that for sure. He only knew he had bought time. He had pulled 20 wild dogs away from his cubs. He had dragged death into a fight with another kind of death. He had survived long enough for an answer to come back through the dark. And that is why the cubs watched him fight until the end. Because for them, it wasn't a lion versus wild dogs. It was their father standing between them and the world.